She thought her billions could buy anything: safety, loyalty, even love. But the freezing river didn't care about Victoria Ashcroft's bank account. When the cold water swallowed her Aston Martin, she didn't scream for her lawyers. She screamed for help. And the only hand reaching back belonged to the one man she had fired just hours before, a struggling single dad who had every reason to let her drown. What happens when the most powerful woman in the city wakes up in a remote cabin stripped of her empire, staring at the man she ruined? And why, in the heat of a storm that trapped them together, did she look him in the eye and ask, "Will you stay if I undress?" The answer would destroy them both before it saved them. The rain wasn't just falling. It was punishing the earth. Caleb Darrow wiped the mixture of mud and water from his forehead, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel of his rusted 2008 Ford truck. Beside him on the passenger seat lay a pink, crumbled backpack, his daughter Lily's. It was the only colorful thing in his gray, exhausted life. "Just 2 more jobs," he muttered to himself, the heater rattling uselessly against the November chill. "Just 2 more and I can pay the heat bill." Caleb was 32, but his eyes carried the weight of a man twice his age. Since his wife Sarah had died 3 years ago, he had been fighting a losing war against the world. He was a master carpenter, a man who could turn raw timber into art, but in this economy, art was a luxury. Now he was a glorified handyman for the Ashcroft estate, a sprawling monstrosity of glass and steel hidden deep in the wooded hills of Oregon. Well, he was the handyman. Until this morning. He glanced at the termination notice on the dashboard. Budget cuts, the email had said, sent by an assistant. He hadn't even met the owner, the infamous Victoria Ashcroft. He only knew her reputation, the ice queen of real estate, a woman who bought companies just to dismantle them, a woman who had just fired a single father 2 weeks before Christmas. The road ahead twisted like a snake through the gorge. Below the Blackwood River was a roaring vein of black ink swollen by days of torrential rain. Suddenly, headlights blinded him. A sleek silver sports car tore around the curve ahead, driving way too fast for the slick conditions. Caleb slammed on his brakes, his truck skidding dangerously near the guardrail. The sports car didn't correct. It hydroplaned. It happened in slow motion. The silver car clipped the embankment, spun violently, and punched through the wooden barrier like it was made of matchsticks. There was no explosion, just the sickening crunch of metal, and then a heavy splash as the car vanished into the dark, churning water below. Caleb didn't think. He didn't think about his firing. He didn't think about Lily waiting for him at his mother's house. He slammed the truck into park, ripped off his heavy jacket, and sprinted toward the edge. Below the car was bobbing, sinking nose first. The current was dragging it toward the rapids. "Hey!" Caleb screamed, sliding down the muddy bank. "Get out! Open the door!" No movement inside the vehicle. Caleb cursed, took a breath that burned his lungs, and dove into the freezing black water. The shock was instant, 1,000 needles piercing his skin. He kicked hard, fighting the current that wanted to smash him against the rocks. He reached the car just as the water rose over the windows. He pounded on the glass. Inside, a woman was slumped over the wheel, blood dark against her pale, blonde hair. The door was jammed. The car groaned, tilting downward. It was going under. Caleb planted his feet against the car's fender and pulled the door handle with every ounce of strength he possessed. The metal shrieked. A rush of water flooded the cabin as he wrenched the door open. He grabbed the woman by the collar of her expensive coat. She was dead weight. He dragged her out just as the silver beast of a car gave up the ghost and sank into the depths. The swim back was a blur of survival instinct. He held her head above water, swallowing mouthfuls of river sludge, his limbs going numb. He clawed his way up the mud bank, collapsing on the wet grass, his chest heaving. He dragged her body further up away from the edge. She wasn't breathing. "Come on," Caleb rasped, tilting her head back. He started CPR, his large hands pressing down on her sternum. "Don't you die on me. Not today." 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing. "Breathe," he yelled over the thunder. He pinched her nose and breathed air into her lungs. He pumped her chest again. Suddenly she convulsed. River water expelled from her lungs and she gasped a ragged, desperate sound. She coughed violently, curling into a ball, shivering so hard her teeth clacked audibly. Caleb sat back, wiping the rain from his eyes. He looked at the woman he had just saved. Even covered in mud and blood, she was strikingly beautiful with sharp features and terrified blue eyes that darted around wildly. "You're okay," Caleb shouted over the wind. "You're safe." She looked at him confused, her eyes glazing over. She was going into shock. He knew he couldn't wait for an ambulance here. The reception in the gorge was zero, and the storm was washing out the access road. He scooped her up in his arms. She felt fragile, trembling like a leaf. "I've got a cabin," he told her, though she was fading out of consciousness. "It's not much, but it's warm." He carried the woman who had ruined his life to his truck, unaware that the real storm was just beginning. The cabin was a relic Caleb had inherited from his grandfather. It was small, smelling of cedar and sawdust, hidden 2 miles up a logging road. It had a wood stove, a leaky roof, and no electricity, but tonight it was a sanctuary. Caleb kicked the door shut against the howling wind. He laid the woman on his leather couch and immediately went to the wood stove, throwing in kindling and striking a match. The fire roared to life, casting dancing shadows against the log walls. He turned back to her. She was conscious now, sitting up, hugging her knees. Her expensive silk blouse was ruined, clinging to her skin. Her lips were blue. "You need to get those wet clothes off," Caleb said, his voice gruff but gentle. He threw a heavy wool blanket toward her. "Hypothermia sets in fast." The woman stared at him. The fog in her eyes was clearing, replaced by a sharp, defensive steeliness. She was Victoria Ashcroft, and even half drowned, she wore her authority like armor. "Where am I?" she demanded. Her voice was weak, raspy, but commanding. "Safe," Caleb said, turning his back to give her privacy. He rummaged through a chest and pulled out an oversized flannel shirt and grey sweat pants. "Put these on. I'll make tea." "I asked you where I am," she snapped through her teeth chattered. "And who are you?" Caleb paused. He turned slowly. The firelight illuminated his face, the scar on his chin, the weary lines around his eyes. "I'm the guy who fished you out of the Blackwood," he said flatly. "Name's Caleb." Victoria blinked. She looked down at her shaking hands. The memory of the crash hit her the phone call with her fiancé Mark. Mark, who she had just learned, was selling her company's trade secrets to a competitor. The rage, the speed, the water. She looked at Caleb. She didn't recognize him. To her, he was just a stranger in dirty work clothes. "My phone," she whispered. "I need my phone." "It's at the bottom of the river along with your car," Caleb said. He set a kettle on top of the stove. "The road is washed out. You're stuck here until morning." Victoria's panic spiked. Stuck. With a strange man. In the middle of nowhere, she was a woman worth $3 billion. People were constantly trying to kidnap her, extort her, or use her. I will pay you, she blurted out. Whatever you want. Just get me to the city. Caleb laughed a dry, humorless sound. Lady, I don't think you understand physics. The bridge is gone. Money can't fix that tonight. He walked over and placed the dry clothes next to her. Change. I'm going to check the generator in the shed. You have 5 minutes. He walked out into the rain, slamming the door. Victoria sat there, trembling. She felt exposed, stripped of her power suits and her entourage. She was just a body, cold and hurting. Painfully, she peeled off the wet silk and slipped into the rough flannel shirt. It smelled like pine and old spice. It smelled like safety, though she hated to admit it. When Caleb returned 10 minutes later, he was soaked again. He shook off his coat and checked the fire. He didn't look at her, maintaining a respectful distance. Tea, he said, handing her a chipped mug. Victoria took it, the warmth seeping into her frozen fingers. She watched him. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way. Broad shoulders, calloused hands. He moved with an efficiency she admired in employees, but there was a hardness in his eyes that unsettled her. Thank you, she said, the words tasting foreign. She rarely thanked anyone. I'm Victoria. I know, Caleb said. She froze. You know who I am. Hard to miss. Your face is on the cover of Forbes and the local paper. Caleb took a sip of his own tea, leaning against the wooden mantel. You're the one who bought the timberlands north of here, and the estate on the hill. Yes, she said, her chin lifting. I am. You're also the one who ordered the staff reduction at the estate this morning. Victoria frowned. I approve budget strategies. I don't handle specific personnel. Well, Caleb said, his voice dropping an octave. You fired me, effective immediately, 2 weeks before Christmas. The silence in the cabin was louder than the storm outside. Victoria stared at him. The man who had just saved her life was a man she had discarded via a spreadsheet. She felt a twinge of something she hadn't felt in years, shame. But she buried it. Shame was a weakness. I see, she said coldly. So this is what? You saved me to get your job back, or is this a ransom situation? Caleb's jaw tightened. He set his mug down with a heavy thud. I saved you because you were drowning, he said, his anger flaring. And I don't want your job. I don't want to work for someone who treats people like line items. He walked toward the door again. I'm going to sleep in the truck. You take the couch. Lock the door behind me. He was leaving. He was actually leaving her alone in this dark, terrifying cabin. Panic surged in Victoria's chest. The darkness pressed in. She had a secret fear, a phobia of the dark born from a childhood trauma she never spoke of. The fire was dying down. If he left, she would be alone with the shadows and the silence. Wait, she cried out. Caleb stopped his hand on the latch. He looked back over his shoulder. What? Victoria stood up, the blanket falling away. She was wearing only his flannel shirt, her legs bare. She felt incredibly small. She needed him to stay. She needed his presence, his protection. But she didn't know how to ask for help. She only knew how to transact. She only knew how to offer value for service. She stepped closer to him. The adrenaline and the shock were making her irrational, twisting her logic. Men wanted one thing. That was the universal truth she had learned in the boardroom and the bedroom. If she wanted him to stay, she had to offer the one thing men couldn't resist. She looked him in the eyes, her voice trembling but defiant. Don't go, she whispered. Caleb frowned, confused. You just accused me of kidnapping you. I'm cold, she said, her voice breaking. I'm still so cold, and I don't want to be alone. Caleb watched her. He saw the terror in her eyes, but he also saw the manipulation. Victoria's hand went to the buttons of the flannel shirt. She took a step closer, her blue eyes locking onto his. "Will you stay if I undress?" she asked. The words hung in the air, charged and dangerous. It was a test, a bribe, and a plea all at once. Caleb stared at her. His gaze dropped to her hand on the button, then back to her face. His expression didn't soften into lust. It hardened into disappointment. He took a step toward her, towering over her. Victoria held her breath, waiting for him to reach for her, waiting for the transaction to be accepted. Instead, Caleb reached out and buttoned the top button of the shirt right up to her neck. "No," Caleb said, his voice low and vibrating with a quiet intensity. "I won't stay if you undress. I'll stay because you're a human being who is scared and hurt. Keep your clothes on, Victoria. Your money didn't buy me, and your body won't either." He walked past her, grabbed a spare blanket from the armchair, and threw it onto the rug in front of the fire. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said, lying down and turning his back to her. "Go to sleep. You're safe." Victoria stood there, stunned, her hand still clutching the button he had fastened. For the first time in her life, a man had looked at her and seen her, not the CEO, not the sex object, but the person. And that terrified her more than the river ever could. Morning broke with a silence that felt heavier than the storm. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside the cabin, encased in a grey, dripping stillness. Victoria woke up stiff. Her neck ached, and for a split second she reached for the 1,000 thread-count sheets of her penthouse bed. Her hand hit rough wool instead. The smell of wood smoke and bacon snapped her back to reality. She sat up on the couch. The fire was crackling softly. Caleb was in the small kitchenette, his back to her, standing over a cast-iron skillet. He was wearing jeans and a fresh thermal shirt, his movements precise and quiet. Victoria pulled the flannel shirt tighter around herself. She felt a strange pang of embarrassment, remembering her desperation the night before. "Will you stay if I undress?" The rejection stung, but the fact that he had covered her up, preserving her dignity when she had tried to throw it away, confused her even more. In her world, leverage was everything. He had leverage, and he hadn't used it. "Coffee's ready," Caleb said without turning around. He knew she was awake. He walked over and placed a mug on the small wooden table in front of her, along with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. It was simple poverty food compared to her usual catered breakfasts, but the smell made her stomach growl violently. "Thank you," she said quietly. Caleb sat in the armchair opposite her, nursing his own coffee. He watched her eat. She ate like she hadn't seen food in days. "Road's still blocked," Caleb said, his voice flat. "Tree down across the main access. I can cut it, but it'll take a few hours with the chainsaw. We're stuck until at least noon." Victoria nodded, swallowing a piece of toast. "I need to get to a phone. I have board members to call. Shareholders." "Priorities," Caleb muttered, shaking his head. "You almost died 6 hours ago, and you're worried about shareholders." "It's not just business," Victoria snapped, her defense mechanisms rising. "It's my life. If I don't show up, they'll assume the worst. My stock will tank." "Let it tank," Caleb said. "Better than being dead." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Last night before the crash, you were doing 80 on a wet curve. That wasn't just bad driving, Victoria. You were running from something." Victoria froze. She lowered her fork. The image of Mark flashed in her mind. Mark standing in her office, smiling that perfect smile, while he downloaded her encrypted files onto a hard drive. She had come home early. She had seen it. And instead of confronting him, she had panicked. She had run. "My fiancé," she whispered, the admission tasting like ash. "Mark. I found out he was selling Ashcroft Industries data to our biggest rival. I saw the emails." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "So you ran." "I didn't just run," she said, her voice trembling. "When I got in the car, the brakes felt spongy. I thought it was just the rain. But when I hit that curve, the pedal went to the floor. There was no resistance." The silence in the cabin stretched thin, vibrating with tension. Caleb stood up slowly. "You're saying he cut your brakes? I'm saying the car was serviced 2 days ago," Victoria said, her blue eyes wide with a dawning horror she hadn't allowed herself to feel until now. "Mark insisted on taking it in for me. He said he wanted me to be safe." She let out a dry, hysterical laugh. "Safe." Caleb walked to the window, looking out at the dense forest. "If he wanted you dead, and you turn up alive, you're a loose end." He turned back to her, his face grim. "Does he know you were coming to the estate?" "No," Victoria said. "I didn't tell anyone. I just drove." "Good," Caleb said. He walked over to a small shelf and picked up a framed photograph. He stared at it for a moment, before turning it toward her. It was a picture of a little girl with bright eyes and missing front teeth, holding a wrench almost as big as her head. "This is Lily," Caleb said softly. "My daughter. She's 7. Victoria looked at the photo, then at Caleb. "She's beautiful." "She's with my mom right now," Caleb said. "The reason I needed that job at your estate, the reason I was begging for overtime, is because she needs surgery. Not life-threatening, but she has a hearing defect. We need the money for a specialist in Seattle." He placed the photo back down, his hand lingering on the frame. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. I am a desperate man, Victoria. I have nothing left to lose. But I am not a criminal, and I am not a killer. If this Mark guy is dangerous, and he finds us out here," he looked her dead in the eye, "I will protect you. But not because you're rich. I'll do it because no father should have to explain to his daughter that he let a woman die just because he was angry about a paycheck." Victoria felt a lump form in her throat. She looked at this man wearing faded flannel, living in a shack, worrying about his daughter's ears, and she felt a crushing weight of guilt. She had fired him. She had signed the paper that took away his ability to fix his daughter's hearing. "Caleb," she started, her voice shaking. "About your job." "Don't," he cut her off. "Don't offer me money now. Not when we're trapped. It feels like a bribe." "It's not a bribe," she insisted. "It's an apology." "Save it," Caleb said, grabbing his heavy coat from the hook. "I'm going to clear that tree. Lock the door behind me. If anyone knocks and it's not me, use the fire poker." He walked out into the grey morning. Victoria watched him go, watching the muscles of his back shift under the coat. For the first time in 10 years, Victoria Ashcroft felt entirely dependent on another human being. And for the first time, she trusted someone. But trust, she was about to learn, was a dangerous thing in a world built on lies. It took Caleb 3 hours to clear the fallen hemlock from the logging road. By the time he returned to the cabin, sweating despite the cold, Victoria had cleaned the kitchen and folded the blankets. It was a domestic scene that felt bizarrely natural. "Truck's running," Caleb said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "We can get you to the highway. From there we can find a police station." "No police," Victoria said sharply. She was standing by the fire, dressed in her dried, ruined clothes. She had tried to pin her hair back, regaining some of her CEO composure. Caleb paused. Why? Mark has friends in the precinct. His brother is a lieutenant, Victoria said. If I go to the cops, he'll know within 5 minutes. I need to get to the city to my lawyer. He's the only one I trust. Caleb sighed, tossing the rag onto the table. Fine, I'll drive you to the city, but that's a 3-hour drive in this truck. I'll pay for the gas, she said, a reflex. Caleb shot her a warning look. She shut her mouth. They got into the rusted Ford. The suspension squeaked as they bounced down the logging road. Victoria sat stiffly, clutching the dashboard. Every time Caleb hit the brakes, she flinched, expecting the pedal to fail. They reached the main highway after 40 minutes. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple. Can I ask you something? Victoria asked, looking out the window. Sure. Why did you stay in the cabin? You could have walked out. Left me there. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. My wife, Sarah. She died in a car accident. Hydroplaned just like you. No one was there to pull her out. His knuckles turned white on the wheel. I couldn't save her, so I guess I try to save everyone else. Victoria looked at his profile, the sharp jaw, the stubble. He was a man shaped by tragedy, while she was a woman shaped by ambition. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be, Caleb said. Just make it count. You got a second chance. Don't waste it on board meetings. Suddenly, blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror. Victoria gasped. Police. Sheriff's deputy, Caleb said, glancing at the mirror. Probably saw my expired tags. I haven't been able to afford the renewal. He pulled over to the shoulder. The cruiser pulled up behind them. Stay calm, Caleb said. I'll handle it. He rolled down the window as the deputy approached, but it wasn't just a deputy. Another car pulled up behind the cruiser, a black Range Rover. Victoria's blood ran cold. She recognized the license plate. It's him, she choked out, grabbing Caleb's arm. That's Mark's car. What? Caleb looked back. The deputy tapped on the window. Caleb rolled it down. License and registration, the deputy said. He was an older man, chewing gum. Officer, is there a problem? Caleb asked. We got a report of a missing person, the deputy said. He leaned down, looking past Caleb. His eyes landed on Victoria. Well, looks like the tip was right. Ms. Ashcroft. Before Victoria could speak, the door of the Range Rover opened. Mark stepped out. He was tall, wearing a cashmere coat, looking perfectly manicured. He ran toward the truck, his face a mask of frantic worry. Victoria! Mark yelled. Oh my God, Tory! He shoved past the deputy, wrenching the passenger door open. Mark, Victoria said, her voice barely a whisper. She was trapped. If she screamed, he tried to kill me. Right now, with the deputy watching, Mark would play it off as hysteria. He would say she hit her head in the crash. He would have her committed. She knew how he operated. He was a master manipulator. I've been looking everywhere for you, Mark cried, grabbing her face in his hands. He pulled her into a hug, squeezing tight. Too tight. I was so worried, he whispered into her ear. Then his voice dropped so low, only she could hear it. You should have died in the river, Tory. Now you're making this messy. He pulled back, tears in his eyes for the benefit of the deputy. Thank you, officer. You found her. Mark looked at Caleb with disdain. And who is the drifter who found you? Caleb unbuckled his seatbelt, his hand inching toward the tire iron under his seat. I'm the guy who pulled her out of the water while you were dry and warm, pal. Mark sneered. Right. I'm sure you expect a reward. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. He threw it onto Caleb's lap. Here, $500. Buy yourself a new truck. Caleb stared at the money, his face darkening with rage. Victoria, Caleb said, ignoring Mark. Do you want to go with him? This was the moment. Victoria looked at Caleb. She saw the fierce protection in his eyes. He was ready to fight the cop and Mark for her. But if he did, he would go to jail. He would lose Lily. Mark would destroy him. Victoria knew she had to play the game. She had to go back into the lion's den, to dismantle it from the inside. She couldn't drag Caleb down with her. She hardened her face. She summoned the Ice Queen. It's okay, Victoria said coldly, turning to Caleb. You've done enough. Mark will take me home. Caleb looked like she had slapped him. Victoria. Take the money, Caleb, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. You said you have bills to pay. Consider this severance. She stepped out of the truck and into Mark's arms. Mark smirked at Caleb. Smart girl. As Mark led her to the Range Rover, Victoria didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see the betrayal in Caleb's eyes. She climbed into the leather seat of the car, driven by the man who tried to murder her. As they drove away, leaving Caleb and his rusted truck on the side of the road, Victoria slipped her hand into her pocket. She had stolen something from Caleb's truck, his spare key. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The Ashcroft estate was a masterpiece of modern architecture, 3 stories of glass steel and imported Italian marble perched on a cliff overlooking the city. It was designed to be a fortress of privacy. Now for Victoria, it was a prison. 3 days had passed since the river. 3 days of suffocation. Grant, formerly Mark, played the role of the concerned fiancé to perfection. He had moved his things into the master suite, citing her fragile state. He had taken her phone, her laptop, and even the keys to her remaining cars, claiming the doctor had ordered complete rest and digital detox to prevent PTSD. Victoria sat in the solarium, staring out at the rain-streaked glass. She wore a silk dressing gown that cost more than Caleb's truck, but she had never felt poorer. "Tea, darling?" Grant walked in holding a porcelain cup. He was wearing a casual sweater, looking every inch the supportive partner. But Victoria noticed the Glock 19 he now kept holstered at the small of his back, barely concealed. "I don't want tea, Grant," Victoria said, her voice monotone. "I want to go to the office. The merger vote is in 2 days." "The board knows you're indisposed," Grant said smoothly, placing the cup on the table. "I've been handling the preliminaries. They're very understanding. Everyone knows how traumatized you are." He emphasized the word traumatized with a look that chilled her. It was a threat. "Play the crazy victim or I'll make you one." "You're selling the robotics division," Victoria said, turning to face him. "I saw the draft on the desk in the study. That division is the future of Ashcroft Industries. Why are you gutting it?" Grant's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went dead. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. His grip was painful. "You're confused, Victoria. That accident scrambled your brain. You don't know what's good for business anymore." He squeezed harder. "Drink your tea. It will help you sleep." He walked out, locking the heavy oak door from the outside. The click of the deadbolt echoed like a gunshot. Victoria stared at the tea. She knew he was drugging her. The last 2 nights she had fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep, 10 minutes after dinner, waking up groggy and disoriented at noon. He was keeping her sedated until the merger was signed, until he could legally take power of attorney over her assets. She stood up and poured the tea into the potted fiddle leaf fig in the corner. She needed to move. Now. She paced the room. The windows were reinforced storm glass, unbreakable. The door was solid oak. She was trapped in a golden cage of her own making. Her hand went to her pocket, her fingers brushing the jagged metal of the key she had stolen from Caleb. It was a talisman, a reminder that there was a world outside where people helped strangers for free, where a man buttoned a woman's shirt instead of taking advantage of her. Caleb. She wondered if he hated her. She hoped he did. Hate would keep him away. Hate would keep him safe. 20 miles away, in a dimly lit dive bar on the outskirts of the city, Caleb Darrow was staring at the bottom of a whiskey glass. The wad of cash Grant had thrown at him sat on the sticky table untouched. $500, the price of a life. "You gonna drink that or date it?" the bartender asked, wiping down the counter. Caleb didn't answer. He was replaying the scene on the highway for the 100th time. The way Victoria's eyes had gone cold. The way she had said, "Consider this severance." It should have made him angry. It did make him angry. But beneath the anger, he felt something else, a nagging gut-level wrongness. He remembered the fear in her eyes in the cabin, the raw, unfiltered terror when she talked about her fiancé. That wasn't fake. You can't fake the kind of tremors she had after the river. "She played you, man," he muttered to himself. "She's a shark. Sharks don't date minnows." He grabbed the stack of bills to shove them into his pocket, ready to leave. As he crinkled the money, something fell out from between the 20s. It was a small, folded piece of paper. Not a bill. A receipt. Caleb frowned. He unfolded it. It was an old gas station receipt he must have left in the truck cab. But on the back, something had been written in shaky, smudged eyeliner. "He cut the brakes. Help." Caleb's heart stopped. She must have written it in the seconds before she got out of the truck. She knew she was walking into a trap. She had done the only thing she could, pushed Caleb away to save him, while slipping him a desperate plea for help. And he had left her there. Caleb slammed the whiskey glass down, shattering it. He didn't care about the blood on his hand. He grabbed his coat and ran out of the bar, the rain hitting his face. He pulled out his phone. He couldn't call the cops. She had said Grant had the precinct in his pocket. He couldn't just knock on the front door. Grant would have security. But Caleb knew the Ashcroft estate better than Grant did. He had built the custom shelving in the library. He had repaired the HVAC system in the basement. He knew about the ventilation shaft that ran from the wine cellar to the master bedroom, a flaw in the design he had pointed out to the architect 6 months ago, a flaw they had been too cheap to fix properly. He dialed a number. "Mom," he said, his voice hard. "Keep Lily for another night. Tell her Daddy has to go fix one last thing." He hung up, climbed into his truck, and gunned the engine. The Ford roared as if sensing its master's fury. He wasn't a handyman tonight. He was a hammer, and Grant was the nail. The storm had returned with a vengeance, masking the sound of Caleb's truck as he parked it a mile down the road from the estate's main gates. He moved through the woods on foot, carrying a heavy canvas tool bag. The estate was a fortress, but every fortress has a drain. Caleb located the service entrance for the drainage system near the cliff edge. It was barred, but Caleb had brought his cordless angle grinder. The wind howled, drowning out the whine of the blade as he sliced through the padlock. He slipped inside, the air smelling of wet earth and copper. He navigated the crawl space by the light of a pen light clamped in his teeth, moving upward toward the wine cellar. Inside the house, the clock struck midnight. Victoria was in the master bedroom, pretending to sleep. She heard Grant pacing in the hallway. He was on the phone, his voice muffled. She sat up slowly. The door was locked from the outside, but she knew Grant kept a spare key in the antique vase in the hallway. She couldn't reach it, but she knew he would come in eventually to check on her. She had to be ready. She went to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. She grabbed a bottle of hairspray and a lighter she had swiped from the coffee table downstairs earlier that day. It was a crude weapon, a desperate flamethrower, but it was all she had. Suddenly, a soft thump came from the walk-in closet. Victoria froze. Grant was in the hall. Who was in the closet? She raised the lighter, her thumb hovering over the wheel. The closet door creaked open. A hand reached out. A familiar, calloused hand. "Don't torch me," a whisper came from the darkness. Victoria nearly collapsed. "Caleb." He stepped out, covered in dust and cobwebs, smelling of the underground. He looked like a phantom. "You wrote a note," he said, holding up the crumpled receipt. "I don't like being fired twice." Victoria dropped the lighter and rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. She buried her face in his dirty coat, suppressing a sob. He felt solid. He felt real. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "I'm hard to get rid of." Caleb said, his arms tightening around her, briefly before he pulled back. "We have to go. Now. I came up through the vents, but we can't go back down that way. It's too tight." "We can't just leave," Victoria said, pulling back. Her eyes were hard again. "Grant is selling the company tomorrow morning. He has the files on a secure server in his study. If I leave now, he wins. He destroys everything my father built. I need those files to prove he's committing corporate espionage." "Victoria," Caleb hissed. "The man is a killer. Forget the company." "I can't," she insisted. "If I run, I'm a fugitive. He'll spin the narrative. He'll come after me, and he'll come after you. I have to end this tonight. I need the hard drive from the study." Caleb looked at her. He saw the stubbornness that had made her a CEO at 25. He sighed, adjusting his grip on a heavy wrench he pulled from his belt. "Where's the study?" "Downstairs, East Wing. But there are guards." "Let's go," Caleb said. He approached the bedroom door. He knelt down and examined the lock. "Standard tumblers. Cheap for a billionaire." He pulled out a tension wrench and a pick. 3 seconds later, the lock clicked. They moved into the hallway like shadows. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic drumming of rain on the skylights. They reached the grand staircase. Below, 2 private security guards, mercenaries, really were standing by the front door, chatting. "Backstairs," Victoria mouthed. They crept down the servants' staircase to the kitchen, then moved toward the study. The study door was ajar. Light spilled out. Grant was inside. They pressed against the wall. Victoria peeked around the corner. Grant was sitting at her mahogany desk, typing furiously on her laptop. The external hard drive, the evidence was plugged in, its blue light blinking. "He's transferring the assets," Victoria whispered. "Once that upload finishes, he owns the controlling stake." "I'll distract him," Caleb whispered. "You grab the drive." "How?" Caleb looked around. He saw the main breaker panel for the East Wing on the wall behind them. He grinned. "I'm going to turn the lights out." Caleb yanked the panel open and pulled the main lever. Clunk! The East Wing plunged into darkness. What the hell? Grant's voice boomed from the study. Now, Caleb whispered. Victoria sprinted into the dark room. She knew the layout by heart. She counted her steps. 3, 4, desk. She heard Grant fumbling, cursing. Security power outage. Victoria's hand found the cold metal of the laptop. She ripped the hard drive out of the USB port. Who's there? Grant yelled, spinning around. The light from his phone screen illuminated Victoria's face. It's over, Grant, she said, clutching the drive. You... Grant snarled. He lunged across the desk, grabbing her wrist. Let go, she screamed. Grant was strong. He twisted her arm, forcing a cry of pain from her lips. Give me the drive, you stupid Crack! A heavy wrench slammed into Grant's wrist. He screamed, letting go of Victoria. Caleb stepped into the phone's light, the wrench raised for another strike. She said, let go, Caleb growled. Grant stumbled back, clutching his shattered wrist. You the handyman! Carpenter, Caleb corrected. He shoved Victoria toward the door. Run, I'll hold him off. Security! Grant screamed, his voice echoing through the house. Intruders in the study. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hall. The mercenaries were coming. Go! Caleb yelled, flipping the heavy mahogany desk over to create a barricade. Victoria hesitated. She had the drive. She could run. But she looked at Caleb standing alone against the coming wave of violence, armed only with a wrench and a father's rage. She wasn't leaving him. Not this time. She grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the sidebar and smashed it against the window. The glass shattered outward into the storm. Caleb! The window. Caleb turned. The door to the study burst open. 2 guards rushed in, tasers drawn. Caleb threw the wrench. It hit the lead guard square in the chest, knocking him winded. Caleb didn't wait to see him fall. He vaulted over the overturned desk and sprinted for the window. Grant, ignoring his broken wrist, pulled the Glock from his back with his left hand. Bang! A shot rang out. A vase next to Victoria's head exploded. Jump! Caleb roared, grabbing her waist. They dove out the window together, plunging into the wet darkness of the garden. They hit the muddy grass, rolling. Move, move! Caleb dragged her up. They sprinted through the rain-lashed gardens, heading for the tree line where Caleb's truck was hidden. Behind them, flashlights iced through the dark and shouts of, "Kill them!" echoed in the wind. They reached the woods, branches whipping their faces. Caleb was limping. He had twisted his ankle on the landing. Almost there, he gritted out. They broke through the trees onto the road. The truck was there, a rusted chariot of salvation. Caleb threw the door open. Get in! They scrambled inside. Caleb jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, and roared to life. As he threw it into gear, the rear window shattered. Another gunshot. Caleb slammed the gas. The truck fishtailed on the wet asphalt, then found traction and sped away, leaving the estate and the screaming Grant behind. Victoria sat trembling in the passenger seat, clutching the hard drive to her chest like a newborn baby. She looked at Caleb. He was pale, sweating, gripping the wheel with white knuckles. "Are you hit?" she asked, panic rising. "No." Caleb said, his voice tight. "Just old football injury." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, putting distance between them and the nightmare. "We need to go to the FBI," Victoria said, her voice steadying. "I have the proof now. The drive has everything. The emails, the wire transfers, the sabotage on my car." "Good," Caleb said. "That's good." But his tone was wrong. It was too final. He pulled the truck over into a deserted rest stop miles from the city lights. "Why are we stopping?" Victoria asked. Caleb turned to her. In the dashboard lights, he looked devastated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. It was vibrating. "Caleb," Victoria touched his arm. "What is it?" Caleb looked at her, tears welling in his eyes. "Grant didn't just have security at the house," Caleb whispered. "When we were in the study, he said something I didn't hear over the noise, but he just sent me a text." He turned the phone screen toward her. It was a picture of a sleeping child in a pink bedroom. Lily. And beneath it, a text message. "Bring back the drive and the girl, or the kid goes quiet, permanently." Victoria felt the world drop out from under her. Grant had found Caleb's mother's house. He had Lily. Caleb stared at Victoria, his soul fracturing. He had sworn to protect her, but now the choice was impossible. "He has my daughter," Caleb choked out. The silence in the truck was the silence of a tomb. The rain had stopped, leaving the night air crisp and cold. The location Grant had sent was the old Ashcroft Mill, a decaying industrial skeleton on the edge of the river abandoned 20 years ago. It was a place of rusted iron and shadows. Caleb parked the truck 100 yards out, hidden behind a mound of gravel. He checked the magazine of the Glock he had taken from the guard at the estate. It had 3 rounds left. "This is suicide," Caleb whispered, his eyes fixed on the single floodlight illuminating the mill's loading dock. "He's going to kill us all the moment he gets that drive." Victoria sat beside him, her face pale, but her eyes burning with a terrifying calm. She had spent the 20-minute drive typing furiously on Caleb's phone. "He won't kill us immediately," Victoria said. "He needs the decryption key. The drive is encrypted with a biometric lock. Without my retina scan or the passkey, it's a paperweight." She turned to Caleb. She reached out and touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "Caleb, listen to me. I need you to trust me one last time. When we walk in there, I'm going to surrender. I'm going to give him the drive." "No," Caleb argued. "We take him out." "We can't risk Lily," she cut him off. "You go for Lily. I'll keep Grant focused on me. I've sent an automated packet to the FBI, but it won't trigger for another 10 minutes. We just have to buy time." Caleb looked at her. He realized she was willing to trade her life for his daughter's. The Ice Queen had melted, revealing a heart of lioness-like courage. "If this goes sideways," Caleb rasped, "I'm not leaving you behind." "Just get your daughter," Victoria said softly. "Promise me." Caleb nodded a lie in his heart. He wasn't leaving either of them. They walked into the light. Grant stood on the raised loading dock, flanked by 2 armed men. In the center, tied to a wooden chair, was Lily. She was crying silently, a piece of duct tape over her mouth. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. It took every ounce of his will not to scream. "Daddy!" Lily's muffled cry reached him. "Let her go, Grant!" Caleb shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Grant laughed. He looked impeccable, even with his arm in a sling. "The handyman returns, and he brought my fiancée." Grant stepped forward, his eyes locked on the hard drive in Victoria's hand. "Give it to me, Tori, and the girl walks." "Let them leave first," Victoria said, stepping in front of Caleb. Her voice was pure steel. "Let Caleb and the girl get in the truck and drive away. Then I give you the drive. Then I give you the password." Grant sneered. "You're in no position to negotiate." He nodded to one of the guards. The guard racked the slide of his rifle, and pointed it at Lily's head. Caleb flinched. Okay, we're doing it your way." Victoria walked forward, slowly climbing the stairs to the dock. She held the drive out. Grant's eyes were greedy, fixated on the device that held his freedom and his stolen fortune. As Victoria reached the top of the stairs, she looked at Grant. "You never loved me, did you? It was always the company." "Love is a poor investment," Grant said, reaching for the drive with his good hand. "Power pays dividends." He snatched the drive. "The password, now." Victoria smiled a cold, terrifying smile. "The password is goodbye, Grant." Grant frowned. "What?" Suddenly the floodlight above them exploded. Caleb had fired. The shot took out the main light, plunging the mill into semi-darkness. In the chaos, Caleb didn't dive for cover. He sprinted. He vaulted onto the dock, tackling the guard standing nearest to Lily. "Kill them!" Grant screamed, fumbling for his own gun in the dark. Victoria didn't run. She lunged at Grant. She wasn't a fighter, but she was desperate. She grabbed his injured arm and twisted. Grant howled, dropping the hard drive. It clattered through the slats of the dock and fell into the dark water of the sluice below. "No!" Grant shrieked. The second guard turned his weapon toward Victoria, the muzzle flash illuminating the dark. Bang! But Victoria didn't fall. The guard did. Caleb stood over him, the smoking Glock in his hand. He had taken the shot while shielding Lily's body with his own. Grant, now weaponless and driveless, backed away, his face twisting in madness. "You ruined it. You ruined everything." He pulled a switchblade from his pocket. "If I go down, you're coming with me." He lunged at Victoria. Victoria stumbled back, tripping over a coil of rope. Grant raised the knife. Suddenly a wooden beam, a 4x4 framing timber, swung out of the darkness like a baseball bat. Crack! It struck Grant square in the chest. He flew backward, air leaving his lungs in a wheeze, and collapsed off the edge of the dock, landing in the mud below with a sickening thud. Caleb stood there, holding the piece of lumber he had grabbed from the floor. The carpenter had used his tools one last time. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights began to dance against the rusted walls of the mill. The FBI had arrived. Caleb dropped the wood. He turned and cut the tape on Lily's wrists. "Daddy," she sobbed, burying her face in his neck. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Caleb wept, holding her so tight he thought he might break her. He looked up. Victoria was sitting on the floor of the dock, shaking. She looked at Caleb and Lily. The family she had saved, the family that had saved her. Caleb stood up, lifting Lily into his arms. He walked over to Victoria and extended his hand. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go home." 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts of corporate espionage, attempted murder, and kidnapping, Grant didn't look at the jury. He looked at the back of the room where Victoria Ashcroft sat. She didn't look back. She was looking at the man beside her. Victoria walked out of the courthouse into a sea of paparazzi. She wore a simple white suit, no jewelry except for a small wooden pendant carved in the shape of a river stone. "Ms. Ashcroft. Ms. Ashcroft, is it true you're stepping down as CEO?" a reporter shouted. Victoria stopped. She smiled at the cameras. "No," she said, "I'm not stepping down, but I am making changes. Ashcroft Industries is launching a new foundation today, the Darrow Initiative, dedicated to providing free hearing surgeries for children in low-income families." She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the questions, and walked to the curb, where a brand-new cherry-red truck was idling. Caleb was behind the wheel. Lily was in the back seat, wearing bright pink headphones, bobbing her head to music she could finally hear perfectly. Victoria climbed into the passenger seat. She kicked off her heels and let out a long breath. "How did it go?" Caleb asked, merging into traffic. "He got life," Victoria said. "It's over." Caleb reached over and took her hand. His hand was still rough, still calloused, but to Victoria it felt like home. They drove out of the city toward the hills, not to the massive estate Victoria had sold it. It was too big, too cold. They were heading to a new house, a farmhouse they had bought together. It needed work. The roof leaked and the floorboards creaked. "You know," Caleb said, glancing at her with a smirk, "the roof on the barn still needs fixing. I might need a second pair of hands." Victoria laughed. "I'm the CEO, Caleb. I don't do roofing." "We'll see," he said. He pulled the truck over at the scenic overlook, the same spot where the river bent below the place where they had almost died, and where they had truly started living. Caleb killed the engine. He turned to her, his expression serious. "Victoria," he said. "Yes." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a diamond ring. He pulled out a button. The button from the flannel shirt she had worn that first night in the cabin. The one he had buttoned up to protect her dignity. "You asked me a question that night," Caleb said softly. "You asked if I would stay, if you undressed, if you gave me everything you thought I wanted." Victoria looked down, tears stinging her eyes. "I remember." "I have a different question," Caleb whispered. He leaned in his forehead, resting against hers. "Will you stay? Even if I have nothing? No empire, no millions. Just me, Lily, and a fixer-upper farmhouse?" Victoria looked into the eyes of the man who had pulled her from the ice, the man who had fought for her when she was nothing but a broken stranger. She kissed him, a soft, lingering promise of a lifetime. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "I'm already home." And that is how the Ice Queen melted. In a world where everyone wanted something from her, her money, her power, her body. Caleb Darrow was the only one who just wanted her to be safe. Victoria learned that the most expensive things in life aren't diamond rings or skyscrapers. They are loyalty sacrifice and a love that stays even when the storm hits. The river tried to take them. The fire tried to burn them. But in the end, they built something that could never be destroyed. What would you have done if you were Caleb? Would you have saved the boss who fired you, and do you think Victoria made the right choice giving up the estate for a farmhouse? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please smash that like button. It helps us bring more dramatic stories to life. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist. Share this video with someone who believes in true love. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.